Sony built pSSR because, at the time, AMD didn't believe machine learning was necessary for high-quality upscaling. Sony, on the other hand, thought ML-based upscaling was the way forward. So they went ahead and developed their own upscaler, along with a dedicated hardware block to support it. But here's where things get really interesting. Fast forward a bit, and AMD does a complete 180. Suddenly, they're all in on ML upscaling, working on their own AI-powered tech. And not only that, Sony and AMD have now formed a partnership specifically for AI development. Now, this raises a huge question. If AMD is already putting resources into FSR4, why would Sony keep investing in pSSR? Doesn't that just seem like a waste of time, money, and effort? Originally, the logic behind pSSR made a lot of sense. Sony needed an ML-based upscaler, and AMD wasn't offering one. So, Sony had no choice but to make their own. But then, CES 2025 happened. Out of nowhere, AMD drops an AI-powered upscaler that looks really good. And here's the thing, upscaling tech isn't something you build overnight. This had to have been in development for a while. The timing issue. Did Sony jump too early? The key problem here seems to be timing. Sony started working on pSSR years ago because there was no viable alternative. Then, at some point in the middle of all this, AMD changed its stance and decided that ML upscaling was the future. By that time, though, Sony was already too far along in their own development cycle to pivot away from pSSR. If we go back to an interview with an AMD spokesperson, they mentioned that about 10 to 12 months ago, they told their team, hey, machine learning is the future. We need to make FSR with ML. But by that point, Sony had already spent years working on pSSR. They were already past the point where they could just scrap everything and wait for AMD's solution. pSSR can deliver results that rival native 4K rendering. Games like The Last of Us, Part 1, and Spider-Man 2 are excellent examples. In The Last of Us, pSSR delivers crisp visuals with high-res rendering and smooth frame rates. Honestly, it's almost indistinguishable from native 4K in some scenarios. Similarly, Spider-Man 2 and Ratchet & Clank showcase beautiful ray-traced reflections that demonstrate what pSSR can do when paired with high-quality rendering pipelines. It's clear that with the right setup, this tech can elevate gaming visuals to a whole new level. But here's where things get messy. Games like Silent Hill 2, Jedi Survivor, and even Dragon's Dogma 2 show pSSR at its worst. The ray-traced lighting in these games often appears noisy, and in some cases, the upscaling is so poorly implemented that it actually looks worse than older techniques like TAA or even FSR. Take Silent Hill 2, for example. The reflections are muddy, and the overall image quality is a significant downgrade compared to other titles using similar tech. And Jedi Survivor? Let's just say the issues with foliage flickering and noisy reflections make it clear that pSSR isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. So, why do some games excel while others flop? It boils down to implementation. Digital Foundry points out that pSSR performs best with less demanding scenarios, games targeting higher internal resolutions with fewer ray-traced effects. However, when you throw complex lighting, reflections, and low-res input into the mix, pSSR struggles to keep up. Another issue is developer resources. Not every studio has the time or budget to optimize pSSR for their game. In fact, some titles, like Alan Wake 2, shipped with glaring visual issues that make you wonder how they passed QA at all. Here's the big question. Can pSSR improve over time? Sony has been tight-lipped about future updates, but there's hope. Similar to how NVIDIA's DLSS evolved dramatically from its early versions, pSSR could benefit from continued training and refinement. One interesting suggestion from Digital Foundry is adding a system-level toggle for users to update pSSR independently, allowing improvements to roll out across all games. That would be a game changer for titles stuck with older implementations like Jedi Survivor. However, it remains to be seen if Sony will go this route. At the end of the day, pSSR is a promising technology, but it's clearly still a work in progress. When done right, it can rival native rendering and deliver incredible visuals. But for now, it's a bit of a gamble. Some games shine, while others make you question whether the PS5 Pro's potential is being fully realized. Is Sony's pSSR actually the key to PlayStation's future, or will AMD's new FSR4 tech make it obsolete? Sony doesn't want to be at the mercy of AMD's FSR tech. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. Think about it. FSR2 runs on both PlayStation and Xbox right now, but let's be real, it's not great on consoles. On PC, you can tweak settings, optimize based on your hardware, and get different results depending on your rig. But on consoles, you don't get that luxury. The implementation is locked down, meaning the results are entirely dependent on how well AMD's tech plays with the console hardware. And that's a problem, especially for Sony. Now look at Xbox. They're completely dependent on AMD's upscaling tech. They're relying heavily on FSR4, and let's be honest, the results aren't exactly blowing anyone away. Sony doesn't want to be in that position. That's why pSSR exists. Because Sony needs their own upscaling tech that they can control, improve, and make exclusive to PlayStation. Some people are saying, well, FSR4 and DLSS4 are way better than pSSR. And yeah, you're not wrong. No argument there. I've seen what a 4090 can do, and it's incredible. But here's the thing. How many people actually own a 4090? Most PC gamers are not running a 3.5K to 4K rig. In fact, a huge chunk of them are struggling to run modern games at even a base PlayStation 5 level. So next time you see someone say, pSSR sucks, DLSS is way better, ask yourself, are they running a mid-range or low-end PC and cherry-picking examples? Or do they have a top-tier GPU and are completely ignoring the fact that most people don't? If you want to be ahead of all the gaming leaks and news, specifically PlayStation news, time for you to subscribe. And as always, a like on the video is very much appreciated.